Well, thank you for sharing that, Stefano. Okay, we're
Yeah,
moving on to
love you,
Adam's
Stefano.
question.
Okay,
Uh, do you
first
know
off,
who was in Midnight
Midnight Cowboy.
Cowboy?
Yes. First off, I have to correct you, Ad, that it was actually 1969, but that was the year it won Best Picture, so I'll still give you credit for that. Yes, Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight.
Any other?
And if
It's
I,
just two men in a movie.
yes, there weren't a lot of stars in it, so, but they were up and comers that broke out of that movie. And speaking of that movie, I have to give a shout out to author Glenn Frankel, who's coming out with his book called Shooting Midnight Cowboy on Tuesday, March 16th. So shout out to him for his release of the book, later to go on paperback.
Okay,
Uh,
so Mike's question: what movie did Will Smith do instead of The Matrix? Ooh.
okay, everyone will know this, but I feel so bad for him because it was one of two movies that he felt ashamed of doing looking back. That movie that year, after Matrix that came out, was Wild Wild West, based on the
Uh,
TV series from the 60s, from the 1960s.
yeah, I would say The Matrix may have been a better call. That's
No,
unfortunate.
no, but
I
back in
think
the
he's done okay though. I think Will Smith has done all right. Oh, was
no,
Michael J. Fox the first choice for Back to the Future? Oh,
no, he
I know
wasn't.
this one,
No, he
but I'll let you
wasn't,
take
because we
it.
know the story so well from documentaries and great stories that Michael J. Fox told and everybody on the movie told, and I'm sure will be touched on when the Movies That Made Us does an episode on pretty soon. Can't wait to look
So
forward to
D-Man,
that.
who was the original?
There were two choices at the time that Universal was going with. One was C. Thomas Howell. If you don't know who he was a young up and coming actor who is in E.T. the Extraterrestrials, one of the kids whose bike gets lifted up in the air, being chased away from the FBI. But he also did a
Mm-hmm.
movie called The Outsiders with Francis Ford Coppola. And and the other one, Stefano, you'll know what I'm talking about. The one that everyone might not know or will probably know in myth and legend was Eric Stoltz. The reason
Mm-hmm.
was because Universal had to get the movie out. Um,
We'll get to
oh,
Adam's question. Don't worry,
yes,
we'll get to
yes.
Adam's
I just want
question.
to tell the story in case people don't know.
Absolutely,
So,
don't worry. I can always scroll back. You keep telling your
okay,
stories
no
and I'll
problem.
scroll back.
Okay, so Universal had to get the movie out at a certain date in the summer of 1985. So they chose July 3rd. So they said with Eric Stoltz, we think he's the guy. And if you don't think so, you can restart filming if you want. So they started filming for, I think, about a week and a half or 3 months. I don't know how long it went for, but it was definitely a little while until Robert Zemeckis, or Bob Zemeckis in this case, that people like to call short form, looked at the footage and said, and Bob Gale too, looked at it and said, it's not working. And that was when they went to Steven Spielberg and said, we need to recast Marty. And they said, okay, if you guys can do it, we can do it. Initially, Michael J. Fox did say yes to the role, but Meredith Baxter Birney on Family Ties was pregnant. So Fox couldn't be let out of his contract by the great, may he rest in peace, creator Gary David Goldberg. So he said, no, I'm so sorry. And he didn't even let Michael J. Fox know they wanted him for Back to the Future. So Christmas time came around after Stoltz was fired, that they came back to Gary David Goldberg and said, we want to cast Michael J. Fox. Is there a way can we do that? And so Gary David Goldberg finally said, okay, if you're willing to shoot around our show, I will give Michael the script for Back to the Future and let him know what he thinks. So he gave him the script that morning when he came in. He said, I love it, without having to actually read it, and said, okay. But then Goldberg said, okay, if you're going to do this, you have to work on our show as long as you can, and then shoot around them. And he said, okay. And that resulted in him getting a 2-hour sleep from doing Family Ties during the day and Back to the Future at night. But it was totally worth it for him to do that because it's one of the greatest performances and greatest switch ups in casting that they did, and felt so perfect because of the way Marty reacts. He's a reactor in the trilogy, and that's what Michael J. Fox did so well. Eric Stoltz,
Mm-hmm.
bless him, he's a great method actor, but could not do the type of comedy they wanted him to do for Back to the Future. And you can see that when he did Mask or Some Kind of Wonderful, or even when he directed comedies, or even in Little Women in 1994, that he's a great method actor for drama, not for comedy. I'm sure he might have gotten better over time, but I think he's better directing comedy than performing in comedy.
D-Man,
So
I am
that's the story.
listening, but the comments that are coming in are also great. I love this question from Stefano. Who is the very best actress in the world? You better say your sister.